Hello, it's Aiden here again, and starting off the final video in the series, and this video is going to focus on kind of some of the more overarching governmental and economic systems in the US that really play a big part in making a change in the way climate change is handled in this country. One of the most important things to understand when talking about climate change is the parties whose interests are at stake. So, in the previous episode, I talked a little bit about how renewable energy sources could provide a clean energy source that will slow the rate of global warming. The reason it's important to talk about the economic side of these energy sources is because one of the biggest industries in the US is fossil fuels. Coal, oil, and natural gas are used pretty much across the entire country. So while switching to clean energy sources sounds good for the environment and pretty much everyone involved, for the companies who make their money off of mining and selling coal or extracting oil, it doesn't sound like such a great concept. So the fossil fuel companies obviously don't want to switch to these clean energy sources, but how does that tie into the actual implication of them across the country? Well, just to give a quick recap of the way that the government system works, specifically campaigning for new positions, it's a huge focus on something called lobbying. So, for anyone that's not sure what lobbying is or just needs a quick brush up, lobbying is basically when either individuals or companies provide funding through donations to campaigning individuals. The people running for office rely on these donations to fund their campaign, to advertise themselves, and travel around, get the word out about their ideas and opinions, and talk to people all across the country. And now, if you do live in the US, you may have noticed a common theme during elections, and that is there are lots of promises that get made during the campaign that a person is running on. However, a lot of the time you will see, sometimes even the majority of these promises go unfulfilled. And now, if we think about lobbying and the way that a candidate goes about getting elected, we kind of start to see maybe why some of these promises that are made aren't always kept. And that's because while they are on the campaign trail, going from place to place and basically telling people what they want to hear to get the most votes out of them that they can to ensure their election, they are simultaneously being paid very large sums of money from companies that have very key interests in the policies that they are going to vote on and have sway on if they are actually elected. And this system that's in place is one of the biggest reasons that you'll see a candidate make all these promises and it sounds almost too good to be true. Like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to hear, or exactly what a specific group wanted to hear. But then when they actually get put into office, you never really see those changes get made. And that's not to say that every candidate ever is just lying through their teeth the whole time. There's lots of bureaucracy and things that get in the way where maybe they really did intend to make that change, but they just didn't have the time to complete it, or they just didn't have the resources or sway that they needed to actually fulfill it. So it's not like they're always just lying to get what they want, but a lot of the time you have to realize that they're saying what people want to hear, not necessarily what they think they're actually going to realistically accomplish. So it may seem a little off topic for me to be delving so deep into a political discussion in a video series that has been largely focused on climate and mostly the science of it this whole time, but that's because it plays a very important role into how climate change is actually viewed by the public, especially in the US. Climate change is one of the most divided issues in our country. You will hear many people on one side saying that it's one of the biggest issues it needs to be focused on right now and it's going to have all these terrible effects, while at the same time you have another large majority of people saying that it's not even real, or we don't have to worry about it, or that it's not an issue caused by humanity. And this system of lobbying kind of makes it more clear that you can see one of those viewpoints very heavily benefits the companies who have tons of money and therefore a lot of power in this political sense to have people believe that. And on the other side is a viewpoint that is very harmful to them. And while this video series is focused on climate change, it's important to realize that this happens for many issues. Economic interests are often the biggest driving factor in policy change in the United States. So if you're thinking about a certain topic or issue that is currently being debated, it's helpful to take a look at it from who stands to make money from this and who stands to lose money from the potential changes that would be made. So it may sound like a pretty bleak outlook on our political system, but there are still things that we can do as voters and part of the masses that individually maybe don't have that much power, but together, collectively, we can make a bigger change. The best thing we can do to help change this for the better is just really try and be aware. When a candidate is telling you all these things or they're releasing all these statements, try and think, is this what they actually think, or are they just trying to make a public persona that's as likable as possible to the vast majority of people? If we all look a little more closely at what is actually being said to us, then it stands to reason that the electoral process will reflect more what it was originally meant to, and not so much a popularity contest or a test to see who can trick the most people into believing what they say. So with that final point, that's gonna bring us to the end of the series, and I just want to end by saying that if you want to take my advice, I strongly urge everyone to go out and support politicians that are vocal about climate change and specifically are for preparing for it and trying to mitigate it, because I hope that I have convinced you that it is a real issue. The changes are already happening and are only going to become more noticeable and severe. So I do believe that it's a very important issue. And even if you don't agree with me about the issue on climate change, I still really wish that everyone would think a little bit more about the decisions they're making in the political sphere before they decide to make them. It's very easy in the US, I know, to be swayed by either your party, whichever way your party goes, you want to just agree with them, or you are being presented with a lot of biased information, so you kind of make a decision without having all the facts presented to you. So I really hope, even if you don't agree on climate change, that at least people will start looking into a little bit more why they're actually voting the way they do or making the decisions that they do, and not just following what someone is telling them. Also, just as a side note, I focus on the US political system because it's where I live and it is the one I'm most familiar with, but if you live in a different country, this all still applies to you. I urge you to be heard in your political system in whatever way you can and really try to influence it to help with the issue of climate change, because it's affecting everyone and it really is important. Alright, so that is going to bring the series to an end here. From the bottom of my heart, thank everyone for watching. This is a topic that's pretty important to me, and I hope now it's a little bit more important to you too. So, as with all the other videos, please leave your thoughts, your responses, anywhere you can, and I will be happy to read them and look into them. So, one last time, thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you have a great day.